what are tariffs and who actually pays the tariffs?
So tariff is basically a tax on goods, I guess would be the way to do it. It's kind of interesting because we sell a lot of services, and for some reason we're really focused on these goods. And over time, services have started to, really take over goods as an importance to the economy as a
Hmm.
whole. But so if a good is made outside of the U.S., which most are, even things that are made in the U.S. are still made with pieces of parts that come from other countries
Yeah.
oftentimes. So if that part or whole completed piece is coming in, there's a tariff. So let's take an example of $1,000 iPhone. So theoretically, and again, I'm simplifying this dramatically because actually the tariffs are really complex and they get into each little market as to how much it's going to be. But let's just say it's 145% tariff, right? That's $1,000 iPhone has got $1,450 of tariffs, right? At 145%. And so who pays that? Somebody pays that. Does the manufacturer in China for that, Foxconn or whoever's putting that together, do they eat some of that? Maybe some. Then you get to Apple. So does Apple then? Let's just say nobody's paying it, and Apple decides to pass the whole thing on to a consumer.
Hmm.
So now the iPhone, $1,000 iPhone is $2,450. All right. Well, how many iPhones are you going to sell at that price versus how many you could have sold at 1,000?
Yeah, because Apple doesn't get any of that tariff money.
No,
So any of that price increase, usually in normal markets, when you increase price, at least your profits go up.
that's right. So, it's the econ thing 101, guns and butter and this whole
Yeah.
supply demand thing that we all learned. And so what happens there is that, when we go to 2450, let's just say they just raised their prices. There was no tariff. Well, they're getting more money even though they're selling less, units because there's less demand at that price level. And all of these companies are trying to find that price level where, they can sell the most units for the most profit, right? And
Yeah, they're
that's
trying to maximize their
yeah.
end result.
But the problem with the tariff is that they don't have control over that. That $1,450 is not theirs. So they're going to raise the price whether they want to or not. So then you can go the other way. Let's just say they keep selling at $1,000. They probably sell a lot of phones. They might even sell more because competitors are going to have a hard time matching that. However, they're probably not going to sell enough to offset the $1,450 if they were to pay it all themselves.
Yeah, because if you're selling for 1,000 and you have to pay a 1450 tariff, you're
Yeah,
losing $450 per phone.
yeah, that would be bad, right? I mean, you would more phones you sell, the worse it gets. And so, and of course, the price of a stock like Apple is based on its earnings, and that could really have a very detrimental effect on the earnings. So, again, if this is a negotiating tactic and we get down to a 10 to 25% tariff, those are we have sales tax here that's nearly 10% here in the county. So it's something that's not good. It does suck money out of the economy, and I think that is another piece of it that's not been explained. Where does the tariff money go?
Hmm.
Does it come back into the economy somehow? So maybe Apple suffers, but the economy still does well because the money comes back around. That hasn't been explained in my opinion. But that's how a tariff works. Who pays it is it really it depends. From what we saw in the previous tariffs, there's kind of a split between the company, the importer, in the most case, paying some, and some of it being passed on to increase price, so the consumer's paying some
Yeah.
of that. But 145% is it's
It,
crazy. I mean,
yeah.
there's no way. Like you just said, I mean, they'd be losing money on every iPhone if they absorbed all the money themselves. So they
Yeah.
have to pass some of that along.
Yeah. So I don't think any business will have an ability. It could just stop their business completely. Like this, the baby mat
Yeah.
business. Basically, they're frozen. If they had a contract where they needed more mats, they can't take that contract on. They're basically stuck with what they have and their existing means.
Yeah, and that's a great example because Busy Baby, we just interviewed, and basically CEOs talking about $30,000 worth of goods ready to get on the boat. All of a sudden now it's almost $200,000 worth of goods. And so who's paying the tariff? She is, right? In order to get this on the boat. It doesn't have $200,000. But she's not going to be able to absorb all that either. She's going to have to increase the price of her baby mats just to stay in business also, right?
Hmm.
But she can't even get it here. She doesn't even have the money to get it here. So that's why this is a lockup. I mean, it's basically a blockade of Chinese products for all intents and purposes, to the point where, that's why I think it'll be settled, right? I mean, maybe I'm wishful thinking, but it's mutually assured destruction otherwise. And so, you get the Cuban Missile Crisis situation where you're going to get pretty close. But I do think they'll be settling this. But that's what the tariffs are, and that's who pays tariffs. It's uh, it's an interesting area, right?
Yeah, and tariffs have been used for years. They've
Mhm.
always been to protect
Mhm.
domestic industries or to generate revenue.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. But our average tariff was 6% on incoming goods, and now it's up to 27% if we keep tariffs where they are with China.
Hmm.
And that's just such a big jump, 21% jump on average tariff, that, it's pretty destructive as far as that goes. And we have had tariffs. Other countries have tariffs. Tariffs are not the end of the world. It has to do with magnitude. It's like anything else. Anything in excess can be, even healthy things. If you eat too many carrots, your skin's going to turn orange. You know what I mean? The carrots aren't bad for you, but so it's just that kind of thing. So that's what's going on with tariffs.